On the morning of February 24th, 2022, millions of people around the world woke up to the same shocking news. Russia had launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Missiles were striking cities. Tanks were crossing borders. Millions of people were suddenly running for their lives. But here's the question. How did this happen? Did the war really begin that morning? Or had something much bigger been building for years? To understand the conflict, we first need to understand the relationship between Russia and Ukraine. For centuries, the two countries were connected by history, culture, language, and politics. But that connection did not mean they always wanted the same future. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. Ukraine became an independent country. For the first time in generations, it was responsible for choosing its own direction. And that direction would eventually become one of the biggest sources of tension in Europe. In 2013, the tension reached a breaking point. Ukraine was negotiating a closer economic relationship with the European Union. But then, at the last moment, the government suddenly suspended the agreement. Instead, it moved closer to Russia. Many Ukrainians were furious. Soon, people began gathering in Kiev's Independence Square. What started as a protest would soon become a much bigger political crisis. The protests continued for months. The situation became increasingly violent. In February 2014, President Yanukovych left Kiev and eventually fled the country. Ukraine's parliament removed him from office. A new government took power. Russia rejected the political change. And then, the situation became military. But Crimea was only the beginning. In 2014, armed men suddenly appeared across Crimea. They took control of important buildings. Russia later confirmed that Russian soldiers had been involved. Soon, Russia took control of the peninsula. A vote was held, and Russia claimed Crimea as its own. But Ukraine and most countries around the world rejected this. The conflict had now become an international crisis. But Crimea was only the beginning. In eastern Ukraine, armed groups began taking control of government buildings. The cities of Donetsk and Luhansk became centers of the conflict. Fighting soon broke out between Ukrainian forces and Russian-backed separatists. For the next 8 years, the war continued in eastern Ukraine. Thousands of people were killed. Millions more were affected. And the conflict never truly ended. To understand what happened next, we need to understand Russia's concerns. Russia saw NATO's expansion toward its borders as a serious security threat. NATO, however, said that countries should be free to choose their own alliances. Ukraine wanted closer ties with the West. Russia strongly opposed this.
No.
As the years passed, the tension grew. And in 2021, Russia began moving large numbers of troops near Ukraine's borders. For months, the world watched as Russian troops gathered around Ukraine. Russia said it had security concerns. Ukraine and Western countries feared an invasion. Countries tried to find a peaceful solution, but the tension kept growing. Then, in February 2022, Russia made its decision. On February 24, 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Explosions were heard across the country. Russian forces attacked from several directions. Millions of Ukrainians were forced to leave their homes. What had been a long-running conflict had now become a full-scale war. But why did Russia invade Ukraine? Russia gave several reasons. It said NATO was getting too close to its borders. It also claimed it wanted to protect Russian-speaking people in eastern Ukraine. And Russia's president said Ukraine and Russia were historically connected. But Ukraine and Western countries strongly rejected these explanations. They saw the invasion as an attack on Ukraine's independence. The real reasons behind the war remain deeply disputed. But one thing was clear: millions of ordinary people were caught in the middle. The invasion changed far more than Ukraine. Millions of people fled their homes. Energy prices rose across the world. Food supplies were also affected. Countries around the world responded with sanctions and support for Ukraine. The war had become a global crisis. But behind the politics, the borders, and the military decisions, there were millions of ordinary people. Families were separated. Homes were destroyed. Millions were forced to leave everything behind. And for those who stayed, everyday life changed completely. The war was no longer just a political conflict. It had become a human tragedy. So, how did the war begin? It was not caused by just one thing. Years of tension and conflict came first. Russia and Ukraine had very different views about the future. Then, in 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion, and millions of ordinary people were caught in the middle. That is how the war began. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to What the Why for more fascinating questions and surprising answers. See you in the next one.